If 2025 felt stressful, like you were constantly stretched thin and overwhelmed, and you want 2026 to be different, then this video is for you. Today, I'm sharing 5 books that help me reduce my stress, reclaim my time, and create work-life balance, even when it felt like I was drowning in responsibilities. And they're going to help you do the exact same. How do I know? They haven't just helped me, they've helped all the women in my coaching program because I gift them these books to help them feel less stressed. And they're going to help you do the same. If you're new here, my name's Marissa McCool, also known as a public health burnout coach, and I'm here to help you reduce your stress and reclaim your life. I worked in public health for well over a decade, working the job that once was 3 separate positions, consolidated into one because of funding cuts and turnovers. And so I know the realities of being stretched thin and having too much work to do and not enough time. And I paid the price and I hit burnout. But I also learned how to get out of burnout and reduce my stress and keep it at bay. And these books really helped me do that, and they're going to help you too. So let's jump right in. The first book is Do Nothing by Celeste Headlee. This is one of the most validating, well-done books on stress, especially as it relates to women. She does a great job weaving together research, history, data, and her own lived experience of creating a more balanced life. There are so many fascinating facts in this book, whether it's about the history of how we've ended up in a society that really glorifies the hustle. She talks about how the 8-hour workday really came to light through the Industrialized Revolution, where unions were advocating for 8 hours a day of work instead of the 12-14. And their logic was 8 hours for work, 8 hours for sleep, 8 hours for play. But that really left out women, especially in those times in which childbearing and household tasks were really left solely to the women. There's also some fascinating research she highlights about the importance of rest. One in which that showed that people who took 11 days of vacation actually ended up getting more raises than people who took less than 11 days of vacation. Fascinating, right? Not only does she share the research, but she shares tips and strategies for how to make changes in your life. And she uses her own lived experience. She went through the process as well. And so one example I loved, she talked about how she stopped being on email so late and her experience of setting those boundaries and not responding immediately and how hard that can be when you've been the person that's always available. But she shared that over time, people started to understand she wasn't going to always be available and wasn't going to reply right away. And so they started to expect it to take a little bit more time, and they were okay with that. And that's how she stopped being on email at 10 p.m. at night. She covers a lot of topics we all struggle with, one of which being when we have a really good work ethic, but it becomes this hustle overwork and how to deal with that. She really covers what's called the busiest gender. She describes it as that, of why women are so overworked and really understanding that. And she talks about how do we actually step away from our desks? How do we step away from all the technology? How do we actually invest in leisure in our life and why it's important? I love this book so much because it really does give the context into why we struggle with overworking. It gives the data and the research to understand why it's important that we make a shift. And it also talks about how to do that and with story, which really helpful stories. So it's not dry at all. So highly recommend. The second book I'd recommend is called Burnout by Amelia and Emily Nagoski. This is a classic. I think this is probably the most well-known burnout book, particularly for women. What I love about this book is it really does a great job of educating you about the stress cycle. What is stress? What stress is not? How stress turns into burnout without making it dry or boring. It's really easy to understand and grasp. They also give one of my favorite definitions of burnout, a definition I have reused many times, especially on podcasts where I'm featured as a guest expert and I'm often asked, what is burnout? How do you define burnout? I love their definition of burnout is really getting stuck in exhaustion, in the emotional experience of exhaustion. I recommend this book particularly for women in public health, and actually this is probably the most gifted book that I've given to clients and colleagues and other people I've worked with, because it talks a lot about the experience, not just of women and burnout. It talks about women with different lived experiences and identities, so it really has a good understanding of intersectionality, but it also talks about the experience of women who are helpers, whether you're a helper because in your family role, that's your role, or in your workplace. Public health is a helping profession. So it really talks about the context and the understanding of how that can lead to burnout. So one of the examples they go into and they explain is human giver syndrome, what that is and how that contributes to burnout, and how to be someone who gives because that's part of our value and finds purpose in that, but not to the detriment of our own well-being and how to really have that balance. This book, again, is also very much rooted in research, but they don't make it dry and boring. And there's lots of fascinating research on particularly how rest, sleep, productivity, other tips and tricks that have been put out into the world and kind of our common knowledge now were actually designed with only men in mind. So one of the ones that have always stuck out with me is how when we think about how much time we should be sleeping, most of us would say 8 hours. Well, this book dives into actually that is for men. The research on sleep was largely done with male subjects. But for women, they found that women need 9 to 10 hours because of our hormonal cycles. All those things play a role in why women are ending up burnt out at such high rates. Now, they don't just dive into the research. They also have some great activities and worksheets and practices you can do to implement some changes. One example I love is they have a decision matrix or a decision worksheet. One of the things that leads particularly women to burnout, because we are leading our teams in the workplace, we're also leading our family and leading our community. So we have to make a ton of decisions all day long. Decision fatigue can create a lot of stress. So they have a worksheet in there to help you make decisions with a lot less effort and a lot less energy needed, which is great. They also do a great job of sharing stories from women from different lived experiences, religions, races, jobs, professions, and their experience of burnout and how they'd recommend getting out of it. Okay, number 3, Rest is Resistance by Tricia Hersey, the founder of the Nap Ministry. I also gift this book quite a lot. I really, really love this book. It aligns a lot with my own philosophy as a burnout coach. Now, this book is a little bit different than the past two. It's not quite as research heavy. So it's really talking about a different way to shift your view and understanding of rest and why we are burnt out. It's really more shifting our perspective on rest, which I love. And it particularly is helpful for women of color and particularly Black women, although everyone can benefit from reading this book. But she talks so much about systems of oppression, of the patriarchy and white supremacy and history and how that's played a role into us hustling and overworking as women. But then the other layer, if you're a Black woman or woman of color, the other layers that come into that. So actually, I want to share some quotes from this book because they are, one of the things I love about this book is it's really inspiring. She talks about her own experience of creating more rest in her life and what's that look like and how it can be really radical. And she has a lot of inspiring quotes in here. So let me just share a few with you. What if you are missing so much of who you are because you're navigating life from a state of exhaustion? Wow. Let's do another one. The concept of laziness is a tool of the oppressor. How many of you feel lazy when you rest? What if that's just the oppressor trying to keep you exhausted? That's a good thing to think about. Here's another one. Rest is somatic work. What does that mean? Rest is about being in your body, not in your mind. She talks about that a lot. Okay, last one. How can we access pleasure, joy, and liberation if we're too tired to experience it? So good, so good. Highly recommend this. This is great for you. This is a great gift for someone you know. Okay, book number 4, Atomic Habits by James Clear. You can see it at Target on sale. But this is not your typical burnout book, actually. If you Googled top stress reduction books, work-life balance books, burnout books, this probably would not come up. It doesn't really talk about the stress cycle. It doesn't really talk about burnout. The reason I recommend it, and it's on this list, is it's a systems book at its core. He talks a lot about creating healthy habits or the habits you want to have and breaking bad habits or breaking habits you no longer want to have as far as creating systems in your life. He teaches you structures to create new habits and end old habits through systems. When we're talking about getting through our to-do list, taking our lunch most days, getting home in time to work out consistently, leaving work at work, those are all just habits. So how do we either create them or break them depending on what we want? He teaches you how to do that through systems, which I love. It makes it so simple. And this is probably the most practical book of all the ones I'm recommending in this video. So even though the examples aren't really about work-life balance, all the tools and systems can be applied to it. So as one example, he talks about an approach called habit stacking, where if you're trying to build a new habit, attach it to an existing habit you already have. So let's say you want to floss more. If you brush your teeth every day, you can stack the new flossing habit to your brushing habit and do that either before or after. So you can apply the same principle to work-life balance or reducing your stress. So let's say you work at a desk, you're staring at the computer all day, and you want to get up and move a little bit more, step away from your computer a little bit more. What's a daily habit you do at work that you could stack that to? Maybe every time you check your email, you also step away from your desk. That could be habit stacking. for that new habit of stepping away from the screen a bit more often. So this book is going to teach you how to build habits in 4 steps, how to break bad habits, how to make good habits last, and how to really create self-control without that fight with willpower. So highly recommend this book. Now the last book, I actually don't have a physical copy of it because I listened to it through my Libby app, but it's Radical Compassion by Tara Brach. I love Tara Brach. I'm a huge fan. I've read lots of her books. I listen to her podcasts. I do her meditations. But again, if you Googled the best books and resources to reduce my stress or in my burnout, this probably wouldn't come up in it. It's not marketed as a productivity book. It's not filled with strategies or tips and tricks to be more efficient and effective in your job, but it is really essential. Here's why. You cannot create work-life balance. You cannot reduce your stress. You cannot get out of burnout without learning how to navigate your emotions. And I'm not just talking about the emotions of stress or overwhelm, but I'm talking about the emotions of anxiety, fear, guilt, shame, self-judgment. When you start the work of creating work-life balance, setting boundaries, saying no, being more efficient, these emotions are going to come up to the surface. For most women in public health, myself included, but also I've seen this in every single woman I've coached in my program, one of the biggest barriers, if not the biggest barrier to reducing our stress, is how we are engaging with our emotions. Most of us are suppressing them, avoiding them, resisting them, and that only creates more exhaustion and it makes it even harder to reduce our stress. So learning how to engage with our emotions in a healthy way, learning how to reduce the intensity of our emotions is one of the most effective steps in getting out of burnout, reducing our stress, creating work-life balance. So I recommend this book because it really talks about how do we shift out of the shame and the guilt and the self-judgment and the self-criticalness into compassion and empathy. And those are really the emotions we need to cultivate as we build new habits, as we start to say no and set boundaries, as we start to shift the priorities in our life. Otherwise, we can get caught in a trap of beating ourselves up, believing we're not good enough, being hypercritical of ourselves. So this book really helps you stop doing that. She teaches a practice called RAIN, which is explained in the book. It's a very simple and powerful tool that really helps you slow down, give yourself compassion and empathy, create space for your emotions where they don't overwhelm you, so then you can move forward without the judgment, without shutting down, without getting overwhelmed. So in summary, these are the books I recommend that you pick up or get from your local library in 2026 to help you feel less stressed working in public health. Do Nothing, Burnout, Rest is Resistance, Atomic Habits, and Radical Compassion. They all offer something different, a different approach, a different perspective, a different knowledge base. But together, they really give you the tools, the skills, and the strategies that you need in order to have more peace, more groundedness, and more calm in your life in 2026. So I hope that you go out and pick one up, borrow it from your library, and let me know what you think. And listen, if there's a book that you think should be on this list that helped you create work-life balance and feel less stress, drop in the comments and let me know. I would love to know. I'd love to pick that up and read it myself. Drop in the comments, let me know, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye, everyone.